Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our AstroNights Live opening presentation. Once again, we have a fascinating presentation planned for you, and we're very excited that you chose to spend a little of your time with us tonight. Our presentation will be about 20 minutes in length, after which we'll be able to address a few of your questions. Those of you participating on Zoom can post a question via the Q&A window. Be sure to hold your question until the end because it might just get answered during the presentation itself. If you're joining us via YouTube Live, you should know that Q&A is not available, so just sit back and relax. Whether you're joining us on Zoom or YouTube, we recommend taking a moment to locate the full screen mode on your app for the best AstroNights viewing experience. All of the websites and resources we'll be discussing during our program are available on our website. So don't worry about rushing to write them down. Just relax and enjoy the program. The links will be waiting for you whenever you're ready. You'll be invited to complete an online survey at the close of the program, and we hope you'll take a moment to share your thoughts with us. Your feedback helps us in planning of future AstroNights events. And now, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Mary McDonald. Mary is the Planetarium Programs Manager at the FSU Planetarium, and I know she's anxious to get started. Mary?
Thank you so much, John, and welcome everyone to AstroNights. As you heard, my name is Mary, and I'm going to be your guide tonight. We will come back to the website later, but I really did just want to, really wanted to make sure everyone knew about that. And I specifically want to direct you to the event page for tonight's program. So I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And, you can find all of this, easily from our main page. But the event page is going to have links to resources about the topics we're discussing tonight. And it has so many. So I really, really encourage you to check that out. All right, so as in many past AstroNights, we like to start with a question, sort of a little trivia question, and I'm only going to give you about 20 seconds to answer this because you don't need to look it up. We just kind of want to guess. So those of you that are in Zoom, I'm going to share this as a poll. So the question is, everyone, how many nations are currently operating missions at the moon right now? Five seconds left. Get your vote in and don't forget to hit submit. Okay, I gave you a few extra seconds. Okay, so let's see what the results were from the audience. So pretty widespread in what we're thinking. Not too many people thought 0, although I wondered if that might be a popular choice. So hopefully you all know that there are things going on at the moon right now. So it's not 0. There is activity happening at the moon, on the surface, or in orbit. So let's find out what the correct answer was. The correct answer is 3. There are 3 nations that currently are operating missions at the moon. And they are the United States, China, and India. So very interesting that 2 nations that were not involved in operations at the moon in the previous era of lunar exploration are now involved now. So that's kind of a little preview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're obviously going to be talking about the moon. We are going to talk a little bit about missions, but first we're going to just talk about just looking at the moon. So I am at the moment going to turn off the chat. I will turn it on again later, but some people do not like the chat popping up during the program. We do have the Q&A window, but as John mentioned, it may be best to wait until the end of the program to enter questions. You don't have to wait, but you just might find that your question comes up during the presentation. So let's take a look at, I'm gonna just go ahead and stop sharing for a moment. And let's take a look at the sky tonight, because that's sort of the main idea of AstroNights is we want to encourage everyone to get outside and take a look at the night sky, something we can do together with our bubble friends. And it's also something you can do in a socially distanced way. So it's a great activity and we strongly encourage. All right, so let's take a look at the current night sky. Okay. I think we can do a little bit better than that. There we go. All right, so if you can see in the top of your screen, you will see that this is actually not, in fact, the current night sky. It is the night sky just a little while ago at 5:30 p.m., just when the sun was beginning to set. So we have a very tiny, funny looking sun over here in the southwest. Don't forget that you are looking at a simulation of the night sky, which is smaller than the real thing. So everything looks a little bit smaller than it will in the real world. And this is actually quite a 2-scale view of the sun at this scale. That does remind me that I am going to now turn off my video so we can all focus on the sky. So there's the sun, it's setting around 5:30 p.m. And I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off the clouds because that will allow us to see what's in the sky a little bit better. Now, this is something you cannot do in the real world. Don't you wish that we could do that? If only. So there goes the clouds, and now we're going to get a better look at what's here in the night sky. So in addition to the sun, we've got a couple of bright lights right here. And these are a few of the planets. This really bright one right here is the planet Jupiter. And then the next one up, going diagonally upward from the sun, is the itty bitty little planet Mercury. And then I'm going to turn off the Jupiter label for a moment because I want you to see that there is actually another planet right there, and that is Saturn. So Jupiter, Mercury, and Saturn all visible around sunset, but those are not the thing that we are talking about tonight. We have mentioned that tonight's program is New Year, New Moon. So we are talking about the moon. So everyone who is watching this program together, I hope you're all enjoying spending some time together with friends and family. Your first challenge as a group is to ask each other if you can see the moon on your screen right now. And remember, what you're seeing on your screen represents the sky at 5:30. So do you see the moon anywhere in the sky right now? Have a look. See if you can find it. Well, if you haven't spotted it yet, I'm going to point out a little clue we can use. So we saw that the sun and the planets are in a little bit of a diagonal line. If you just keep going with the diagonal line, you will come across the moon. There it is, right there. You can barely see it, but you can see just a teeny tiny little bit of light right there. Now, before we go back and talk more about the moon, I'm going to just continue that line. So let's continue that diagonal line upward from the sun. And if you keep going along that line, you will actually encounter another planet. Can you believe that? 4 planets and the moon. And that one is Mars. Now, this one is going to be visible throughout the night, tonight, and for the next several nights, months actually. But these other planets, as you can see, they're getting pretty close to the horizon. They won't be visible much longer. Okay, so let's clear all of those selections and let's just focus on the moon, which, if you can remember, is right there. So what we really are encouraging everyone to do is to engage in a really simple observing activity. After this program is over, if you don't start tonight, it's okay. You could do it tomorrow. We'd really like you to go out and take a look at the moon each night and see how it changes. And one of the resources that we linked on the event page, I'm gonna come back on camera so you all can see it, is we linked one of these moon journals. Okay, there we go, the moon journal. So it's a really simple way to record what you see of the moon each night. And basically what you're gonna do is you're going to color in, write the date and the time and color in the moon, showing how much of the moon is dark and how much of it is illuminated. I'll show you, I've started one. I started one yesterday, and yesterday I did not see the moon at all. So I just, you know, it's kind of the opposite of what you might think. You're coloring in what you don't see because it's a white paper. So I colored it in all black because I didn't see the moon at all. And then tonight I colored it in black, but I left a little bit of white where I saw some light. And I actually went over with a little yellow marker and added some yellow there. And then you're going to keep doing that each night, showing how much of the moon is illuminated. Now, one of the important things here is the time. So one of the most challenging things about moon journals is that the moon is not visible all night long. Sometimes you look up and you don't see the moon at all, but it's not because it's not there. It's because it maybe hasn't come up yet. So it gets a little challenging. If you just go and look at the moon whenever you want, you might be missing the moon every single time you go. So a really good way to do your moon journal is to look at the moon at the same time every night. And that's a really good practice for any kind of science investigation, even a simple one like this, is you want to see how something changes. So you want to limit the amount of things that are different each night. The only thing that's going to change is that it's a different day. You want to look at it at the same time every day, and that will really allow you to see a pattern. So I strongly recommend that you start doing this soon. Like I said, you don't have to do it tonight, but if you want to start tomorrow night, you could start looking at the moon at 5:30 p.m. every night. And I promise you that that is a good time to look at the moon if you start tomorrow. So let me give you a little preview of what you're going to be seeing. And of course, I want you to look at the real sky, but this is going to give you a little bit of an idea of what to look out for. All right, so let's jump forward in time. If you haven't noticed this yet, in the upper left-hand corner, you should see the date and time. It's the 15th at 5:30 p.m. And don't forget that our moon is right here. Let's go ahead and highlight the moon. And we are now going to jump forward by 1 day. So when you look at this date, it will change, but don't look at the date. Let's keep our eye on the moon. So let's jump forward. And again, if you're with a group right now, I want you to ask yourselves, now that it's the 16th, did anything change? Does the moon look different? Is anything different about the moon? maybe we need to go one more day forward in order to really see it. So we're going to jump forward again to the 17th. All right, and hopefully now you've seen that even if you can't tell if the moon looks different, you can tell that it is in a different position. So at the same time each night, the moon is not in the same place. If you've been keeping your eye on the sun and the planets, those positions seem to be staying a little bit more the same. They're not changing. They are actually changing, but not so much. But the position of the moon is definitely changing. Let's go forward again. Now we're at the 18th. So now you should be able to see that more of the moon is illuminated than it was before. And let's go forward now again, a little bit more illuminated, and one more day to the 20th. And this has brought us to a part of the moon cycle called first quarter moon. Now, we're not going to spend time today going into the why of the phases of the moon, why it looks different each night, but I must, again, strongly recommend the resources on our event page. I've shared a couple really, really great resources for how to develop an understanding of the moon phases. But I will very briefly say that the primary reason is the change in the angle between the Earth, the moon, and the sun. So you can really clearly see that the angle between the moon and the sun is increasing. They're getting farther apart. And what that means for us on the Earth is that more of the moon that's illuminated is visible to us. So we're starting to see more and more of the moon be illuminated. Okay, let's keep going forward one day at a time. The 21st, the 22nd, we're seeing more of that moon illuminated. The 23rd, 24th, 25th. Oh, we're running out of space. We're not really seeing the moon too well anymore. So I'm going to rotate us just a little bit so that we can see the moon. Okay, there we go. Let's go one more day forward to the 27th. You might be thinking it looks like full moon. Not quite. Full moon is actually on the 28th. So let's jump forward one more day. And we don't see the moon, but you can tell because you can still see the label that the moon is below the horizon. So we don't have the moon visible yet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that we can see more of the sky. There we go. I want to zoom out just a wee bit more. We get this funny looking circular view. I want us to be able to see the sun because this is my favorite thing about full moon. On the 28th, if you get a chance to get outside and check for the moon at sunset, I strongly recommend it because on the night of full moon, you get to watch, hopefully, if the weather cooperates, a beautiful sunset and at the same time, a beautiful moon rise. Because remember that angle between the sun and the moon was increasing. So by the time we get to full moon, they're on opposite sides. And the full light of the sun is illuminating the full face of the moon. And you get a beautiful, bright, full moon. So that's going to be January 28th for us. And so hopefully you have kept going with your moon journal. And at that point, so we got a chance to see that at 5:30 that night, the moon was not up yet. So that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind when doing a moon journal is that the moon rises at a different time each night. So after full moon, I do encourage you to keep going with your moon journal. But at that point, you will have to stay up later to be able to see the moon. So those of you with young kids, you might go out before bedtime and still not see the moon. If parents really want to try doing this moon journal with kids, or if adults want to do it themselves, no matter who you are, I recommend that you look for a list of moonrise times and pay attention to that before you go out and make your observations. And you bet I have that listed on the event page, a place where you can find moonrise times. Okay, so that's our little exploration of observing the moon in the sky. But the other part of the program we wanted to do today was we wanted to talk about the moon in the news. So towards the end of 2020, there were a lot of news stories about the moon, and I'd like to touch on some of those. Now, whenever we talk about the moon in the news, we always end up going back to old news, to history. So let's take a look at some of the past exploration of the moon. Look at this amazing view of the moon up close. And I've marked off a few of the past landing sites in the history of lunar exploration. So of course, you're seeing the human landing sites of the Apollo missions, but there were so many more. There was the American Surveyor program, which operated from 1966 to 1968 with multiple successful landings. There was the Soviet Luna series of landings. And I should mention that Surveyor and Luna were all robotic landers. So non-human missions. I don't mean any disrespect by leaving out so many of the Luna landings here. There's so many of them that it just made it look cluttered. So that's the only reason I didn't list them all. But I did include Luna 24 here because I really wanted to point out that this mission was in 1976, and there has not been a lot of exploration of the surface of the moon on the surface since then. There's hardly been any since 1976. And in particular, this mission was a robotic mission that landed on the surface, picked up samples, and returned those samples to Earth. And guess what? Those samples from 1976 were the last samples that we had from the moon for many, many, many years until 2020. So in the year 2020, the first samples since 1976 were collected and returned from the moon. And that happened just in December. I've pointed out this area, Mons Rumker. This is the region where a Chinese spacecraft called the Chang E5 lander landed, successfully collected samples and returned them to Earth in December. This was a really interesting, successful mission. You might notice that not only is it finally some new samples, but they were samples collected from an area that had not been explored in any of these past missions. So that was good. And it's also an area that was geologically different than all the past samples that we have. So let's talk a little bit about these landing sites. Look at all the landing sites from the 60s and 70s. They're kind of all sort of clustered in a certain region on the moon. Well, for starters, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to put up some guides for you. I don't know why it just shifted the moon for me, but there you go. We have these poles that represent the North and South Pole, and this red line represents the lunar equator. So a lot of these landing sites were pretty close to the equator. Back in those days, in the early days of space exploration, these sites were chosen because they were safe, because they were flat. They didn't have a lot of rocks or mountains on them. Oh, okay. So I'm getting some info that you cannot read the words. And there is perhaps a reason for that. Let's try. Can I hear from one of my colleagues? Do the words look better now?
I'm afraid not.
No? Okay. Let me just, let me try a brand new share. Okay, try a quick reshare. All right, so sorry for those of you that maybe couldn't read some of the words earlier. Hopefully you can get a chance to read some of them now. But essentially, they're just the names of the missions. We were just mentioning that the majority of the landings were near the lunar equator. And the sites were chosen for easiness of landing and for safety. So they chose sites that were smooth, that didn't have a lot of mountains or rocks. They chose sites that would be in the sun so that the astronauts would not have to operate in the dark, or the robotic spacecraft wouldn't have to operate in the dark. And most importantly, they all chose sites that were on the same side of the moon, what we call the near side of the moon, the side that faces the Earth, so that they could communicate with Earth. Obviously, it sounds like they were choosing them based on what was going to be the easiest and most successful, not necessarily the most interesting. But in those days, we didn't know much about the moon. We didn't have a lot of, we had no samples. So everything was interesting. Everything that they did was interesting and great. But now, for the next generation of lunar exploration missions, we really need to focus on science goals. We need to think about what we're trying to accomplish and how we can choose sites that support those goals. So the big science goal right now is the search for water on the moon. I know that many of you may think of the moon as a place with no water, but that is not really the case. There were several orbiter missions that contributed to evidence that there is water on the moon. And one of the things that these orbiters do is they are able to detect the presence of certain elements. So I'm going to show you a map that shows the presence of the element hydrogen on the moon. Okay. Hydrogen, let's take a look. In this map, the areas that have low hydrogen will be blue. So blue is low hydrogen. The areas that have more hydrogen are going to be green and yellow. So what these results revealed, what these studies revealed, and I'll show you that right now, are that there was a significant amount of hydrogen detected near the lunar south pole. So now a lot of the study of water on the moon is really focused on the south pole. And if we get a little bit closer in, I've highlighted one of the locations of study there. Let's go back to the regular moon. So yeah, the Artemis Crater right here is the location where a spacecraft called L-Cross was intentionally crashed into the lunar surface in 2009. So it crashed into this crater, blew up a cloud of debris, and one of the orbiting spacecraft passed through the cloud and sampled the material. And it indicated that there was indeed water ice in this material. So the theory is that there is probably water ice, and let's get even a little bit closer. The thought is that there's water ice located in craters in these regions where the sun does not shine. So on the moon, and I think I may have seen some questions about this earlier, on the moon, pretty much there's only one thing that determines the weather, and that's the sun. When the sun is shining, it's super, super hot. When the sun is down and it's nighttime, it's super cold. That's it. So anytime the sun hits the surface, any water that might be there is going to just poof, evaporate very quickly. But if there were areas that were permanently shadowed, then water could exist there in the form of ice over long periods of time. And that is what we think is going on with the South Pole. So the South Pole is a very active area of research. But one more result that happened in 2020 in October that I want to point out is that a really, really surprising result from a different, a telescope actually confirmed the presence of hydrogen across the surface of the moon that is likely to be thought tied up in water molecules. So this result shows that there's water all over the surface, even in areas that are sunlit. It's still 100 times drier than the Sahara Desert, so still very, very dry, but it's there, and any amount of water is very interesting, and we'll talk about why. So a lot of the upcoming science missions, and I'm talking science missions, so small probes that are going to be sent and small landing craft that are robotic, they're really going to be looking at this question about water. We want to know, how did the water get there? How long does it last? How does it survive in this day-night cycle? And how does it interact with the environment of the lunar surface? So those are the really important questions. And of course, a lot of it is tied to future human exploration. No matter how it could be extremely difficult to extract and use water from the lunar surface, but it still might be easier than bringing water yourself from Earth. You know, we have so much water here on Earth, but it's really challenging to transport water through space in large quantities. So any amount of water that we could find and use on the moon would be appreciated. And that is why future lunar human missions are really going to be focused on the South Pole. So the South Pole is the prospective site for the next human mission to the moon. And that's going to be challenging. It's going to be much more challenging for landing than the more simple sites that were chosen in the Apollo era. But finally, that brings us to our final moon news of the year. Just a few weeks ago, it was announced that even though we don't know when humans will be going to the moon, please don't trust any date that you hear because these things change very quickly. So I'm not even going to repeat a date. We don't know when, but we do kind of have a sense of who. The potential Artemis Crew members were announced. Of course, oh yeah, so the next human mission to the moon is called the Artemis program. It's going to be a small crew, you know, probably 3 to 5 individuals, but we do know that they will be chosen from this list of people. So this is the crew of eligible astronauts who will be chosen for the first and then subsequent Artemis missions. And just so you know, the first human mission is going to be called Artemis 3 because Artemis 1 and 2 are going to be uncrewed missions. And those are supposedly going to be happening relatively soon. So it's a large crew here. I was happy to see so many familiar faces. 2 of the faces that I was really happy to see were this guy over here, Scott Tingle, and Stephanie Wilson, both of my home state of Massachusetts. Of course, you know, even traveling into another world, you have to rep your home state. I also wanted to point out that those are the 2 oldest members of the group. They're both over 50, and that means that they were alive to see the first human landing on the moon. And I can just imagine that seeing that inspired them, and they've probably been dreaming of going to the moon for over 50 years. And the dream is still alive for these 2. So I think that's very inspiring. I'll point out one more inspiring character, Joe Acaba, a former teacher, also over 50. So I'm really happy to see this really diverse group of people in so many ways. All right, so that's it for our moon news. I hope that all this talk of the exciting research that's happening on the moon, I really hope it inspires you to get out and do your own research, which starts with that moon journal. But so for now, I would like to turn it over to questions. So if you had a question and haven't entered it yet, please take a moment to locate the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And I will come back on video to make myself seem more real. All right. So I'm going to go with the first question I see here from Holly. What makes those astronauts eligible for the mission? Do they have to meet certain criteria? Definitely yes. There are certain criteria. I can't say that I specifically know what they are, but as you can see, it is not that you have to be X number of years old, because there's a wide range in ages. So some of them are older and have a lot more experience, but some of them haven't even been to space yet. So there definitely are some criteria. It probably has a lot to do with diverse skills that astronauts will be able to bring to the mission. I would encourage you, and let me open up the chat one more time. I would encourage you to check out the Artemis Crew page that we have linked on our event page. That little graphic I just showed was taken directly from that page, so you can click on each one of them and learn a little bit about them. Sorry, I didn't have the greatest answer for that. I can't say I know too much about how they select. Okay, great question from Tom. Hydrogen is found in igneous rocks. Are we sure the hydrogen on the moon is water? Great question. I know that I didn't mention that when we first looked at the hydrogen map. So the way that those maps are created, they're created by orbiters who are detecting certain signals using a tool called a mass spectrometer. And this is not totally my area of expertise, but the signal that they are detecting is indicative of the presence of water. So those of you in the audience, remember water is H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen, or hydroxyl, which is OH, hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So it could be one of those things. It could be either one. Now, hydroxyl can be, is a byproduct of certain chemical reactions involving water, but it can also be a byproduct of reactions that do not involve water. So no, that hydrogen, we are not 100% sure all the signal is from water. But there is other more direct evidence like the L-Cross debris plume that are more conclusive for water. But really nailing down those questions about water are some of the most important science goals in the next few years. So for example, that hydrogen map that I showed, it's very low resolution. So we don't, we have kind of an idea of where these high concentrations of hydrogen are, but we need better resolution. So that's one goal, is to have like really high resolution maps created. And then of course, another goal is to have landing missions that can get more direct evidence. Okay. I have a question from 7-year-old Vedanth. How many craters are there in the moon and how are they created? Okay, I can't tell you for sure how many craters there are, except that there's a lot, but I can tell you how they're created. They're created by impacting and this, you probably could have guessed this, impacting objects hit the moon, they blow up a bunch of material and leave a hole, a crater. And in the early days of the solar system, this used to happen all the time. So you see how many craters are on the moon. And actually, this is probably a great opportunity to show everyone the other side of the moon, the far side, the one that we never get to see from Earth. The reason why I want to show you the far side is because it has even more craters. So this level of cratering should give you an idea of how often objects were getting impacted in the early days of the solar system, all the time. But you might be asking, like, well, why doesn't the Earth look like that? Because the Earth has so many other things going on. The Earth has water, it has active volcanoes, it has wind, and those things kind of like, they resurface the Earth, they wipe away the craters. But the moon doesn't have any of that. So it's what we call an ancient surface, a surface that has not changed in a really, really long time, since the early days of the solar system. I do want to say one more thing about craters, which is I really encourage you to research counting craters, because this is a really important skill in planetary science. If you can count a crater, you can figure out, so if you can count how many craters there are in a certain area. So this is something that planetary scientists really do. You take a certain area and you count the craters. So like I said, I can't tell you how many craters are on the whole moon, but anyone can grab a small picture of the surface of the moon and count the craters in a certain area. And that information, the crater count, is going to tell you how old the surface is, because we know that all the objects in the solar system were getting bombarded at this, in the same way, at the same time. So if we see a certain amount of cratering, that can tell you the age of the surface. So I don't have an answer for you, but I will tell you it's a great question, and you can explore the answer yourself by counting craters. I should probably put a resource about counting craters on the event page. Okay. Okay, let's see. I know my colleague John is answering some questions by typing. Let's see. I have a question. What is the focus of the 3 current missions on the moon? I don't think I have time to answer that one. Which one should I do next? Okay, here's a question from Amy. If water might be present in higher quantities in areas of the moon not lit by the sun, are there plans to sample the dark side of the moon? Great question. And I'm addressing that one because I am here to tell you, everyone, that there is no dark side of the moon. There isn't one. Both sides of the moon get illuminated by the sun. So remember, at certain times of the lunar cycle, we see a moon that is half illuminated and half not illuminated. But the truth is that just like the Earth, think about the Earth. Half the Earth is always in the sun and half the Earth is dark. The same is true of the moon. So half the moon is always in the sun and the other half is dark. But what we see from Earth is we don't always see the side that's lit up. So when we see the first quarter moon, we're seeing half lit up and half dark. That means that we're basically looking at the line that separates the side that's lit up and the side that's dark. But over the course of the lunar cycle, every part of the moon is getting sun. So there is no side of the moon that is permanently dark. What many people think about when they see the dark side of the moon is they are talking about the far side of the moon, which is the side that never faces the Earth. So because of something called tidal locking, one face of the moon it is always facing the Earth. One side of the moon is always facing the Earth. The other side is known as the far side. And I did want to just quickly mention that there have been very, very little explorations of this side because it is very difficult to do a mission there, because you're not able to communicate with the Earth. You're not able to be in constant communication with the Earth. I have pointed out over here, I pointed out this one area on the far side called it's called the Karman Crater. I don't know why it doesn't look right there, but that is the location of the first ever landing on the far side, and that was also a Chinese mission. That was Chang E5. It landed there in 2018. And is actually, it's still, the lander is still there, still studying it. But to your question, so there is no full dark side, but there are these dark craters all over. And they're actually because of the tilt of the moon, they're mostly located at the poles. So that these unlit areas, the craters down at the south pole of the moon, that is really, really where a lot of the future missions are going to be focused, including the human missions of the Apollo program, Artemis program, sorry. Okay. All right. What else do we have here? All right, I have a question here from Leah and Ariana. When the moon, so this is about observing the moon, so that's why I like this question. When the moon waxes, does it rise earlier every day or later every day as opposed to when it is waning? So great question. What we observed today is we observed the first part of the moon cycle. So we didn't actually start at new moon. That was kind of a lie. New moon was 2 days ago, but that's fine. So we started a little after new moon, and we watched as more and more of the moon was illuminated. So that would be a waxing moon. Waxing means it gets bigger. Of course, the moon doesn't get bigger, but the illuminated area gets bigger. So we watched the moon waxing, and if you were, we didn't really get to see this, but during that period, all the way up to full moon, the moon rises later each day. So a little bit later each day, but then of course it's, after midnight, then we can start thinking of it as rising earlier in the morning. So I don't know if I answered that question correctly, but it is, or to answer your question as you wanted, but yes, it does rise at a different time each day. And during the part of the cycle, we observed the moonrise would be slightly later each day. And then again, after full moon, continuing to get later and later each day. Okay. So I'm going to take a quick moment to take a little break because I wanted to really make sure that we took a look at the website that I keep talking about, which is so great. So our primary website for the Krista McAuliffe Center is, I'm going to give you our primary website. Or I'm trying to, but you know what? I'm going to just go to the website and we'll take a look. So our website is cmcenter.org. On our front page, you're going to find all of the most useful resources for you, including the section that I directed you to earlier, From the Dome to Your Home. This is where you'll find a lot of resources that are inspired by the planetarium. The Krista McAuliffe Center manages the Framingham State University Planetarium. And here is where you'll find all the information about AstroNights. If you go to the AstroNights page, you can first of all see all the upcoming programs. You can see past programs, so if you can watch recordings of past programs and see their event pages. And here is tonight's event page. And there really is so much here. So I want to just direct, so under resources, some of the things that people have been asking about. See, we have moonrise times and dates, your moon journal. Oh, and I didn't mention that one of the steps of the Artemis mission, there's many steps before we can get people to the moon, is that there's going to be live on NASA TV tomorrow a test of the new Space Launch System, which is the rocket that will take astronauts to the moon. And so there's going to be a major test tomorrow, and I've given the information about how to watch that. There's so many great teaching tools here about learning about the moon phases. And then finally, just another question I saw was a question about some of the missions. And I don't really have time to go into it, but I really can't recommend enough the resources from, where are they here? The Planetary Society, Your Guide to the Moon from the Planetary Society, and Every Mission to the Moon Ever. I really like this page. I look at it all the time. So if you want to know about all the missions that are going on at the moon, here's the 3 that are active right now. The Indian spacecraft, Chandrayaan-2, unsurprisingly, it's an orbiter that studies the moon's surface and searches for water. The Chang E5, which I mentioned earlier, is the one that landed on the far side. And I mean, that's just super cool to just show that it can be done and study this surface that's never really been studied in situ before. And then NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and what doesn't that do? It has produced some of the most incredible images of the moon, high resolution maps that you see every day. Whenever you look at pictures of the moon, you're looking at LRO images, and so many instruments that have taught us so much information about the moon. So I may have needed a little cheat sheet for the names there, but it's a great opportunity to share some resources with you all. All right, well, I think that's probably enough questions for tonight. We have so many here. Oh, there's so many great questions. And, you know, the moon is such a rich topic that I really kind of wanted to have a focused conversation about it today. But you've all asked some incredible questions that are going to inspire future AstroNights about certain specific topics about the moon. We talked a little bit about missions today, but there's so much science that I'd love to talk more about. All right, so I think that's gonna do it for AstroNights for tonight. Let me stop sharing for now. Thank you all so much for coming, for sticking with us. If you're on the Zoom, when you do leave, you will be invited to participate in a survey. Please do try to just do that right before you close the browser. That would be really helpful. Otherwise, you will also get an email about it. If you're watching on YouTube, I will invite you to do the survey too. I know that's a lot to ask to go back to our event page, but the survey will be put up on the event page. And that's where you'll find all those great resources as well. Oh, and for the very few that are maybe still with us right now, one thing I didn't get a chance to share is that the McAuliffe Center is actually offering a really unique opportunity. during February vacation, so the week of February 19th. We're offering a first of its kind unique program for high school students. It's a 5-day program where there'll be a 1-hour session each day, all about the life cycle of stars, which is also the topic of a future AstroNights. But it's going to be really, really rich and engaging, interactive experience about a topic that high school students don't often get a chance to learn about in school. So very last thing I will do is share that, the February vacation program, but it can definitely be accessed from our main website. But here is the page for that program coming up in the chat right now. All right, thanks everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you next month at the next